This episode could be one of the most insightful conversations that we've had so far on this podcast. We interview Lydia Dupree, a biochemist, about all things low tox clothing. Clothing is one of these areas of low tox living that you may not initially think about. It may not be as top of mind as, say, your kitchen utensils or your fragranced beauty products, but it is so important because we are literally touching fabric nearly 100% of our lives between our clothing, our sheets, our towels, and there could be some unwanted ingredients in those fabrics. In this conversation, we talk to Lydia about natural versus synthetic versus semi-synthetic fibers. We talk about certifications you can look for to ensure health and safety of your clothing. We talk about the health of garment workers and what that tells us about the toxicity of the fashion industry. We talk about the dyes in clothing. We talk about sustainable versus non-toxic clothing. But most of all, we help you to not be overwhelmed by the subject. It is certainly an area of low tox living that could be very overwhelming. But what I appreciate so much about Lydia and about this conversation is that she makes everything so digestible to understand. She gives a lot of practical tips. She explains the science to us in a very comprehensive way. Lydia has created a platform called Day into Eve that helps you do just that. It is an incredible resource for finding non-toxic and sustainable clothing options. Everything is science-backed. Everything has been vetted. It is my personal go-to resource for finding non-toxic clothing. I am really, really excited to share this episode with you. I hope you enjoy it, and I hope you leave it feeling empowered to make decisions about the clothing that you choose to purchase. Welcome to Detox Your Dome, the podcast, where we empower you with knowledge about the ingredients that make up the products that we use every day. And we help you to become a more informed consumer on your journey towards living a clean, safe, and toxin-free lifestyle. Detox Your Dome. Body, home, planet. Welcome back to the Detox Your Dome podcast. My name is Sophia, and I am joined today by my co-host Monica and our lovely guest Lydia Dupree. Lydia is a biochemist that has built a platform that helps brands and consumers find healthy, non-toxic clothing options. She is an expert in all things low-tox fashion and how natural and synthetic fibers can impact our health and the health of the planet. Welcome, Lydia, to the podcast.
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm very excited to be here.
We are so excited to have you here. Okay, I want to start with a little fit check. Let's tell us what you're wearing today.
Yeah, so my sweater is a blend of organic cotton and a seaweed-based fabric called Seacell. It's by the brand Frank and Oak. They're out of Canada. And then I have lounge pants by Lydia that are all organic cotton. They're Blue Sign certified, and they're probably the most comfortable pants that I own.
Very cute. Very, very pretty.
Seashell fabric. I can't wait to get all into this. I have so many questions already. Okay, so you are a biochemist. How did you get into fashion?
Yeah, so I studied biochemistry, and my focus was really on, the metabolic processes of the body, how nutrients can impact you at different levels, how environmental toxins can impact you, but it was really focused more on food, beauty products, just general consumer products. And then about 6 years ago, I read an article about bamboo and how many endocrine disrupting chemicals are needed to make it soft enough actually to wear. And many of these chemicals have been shown to negatively impact fertility. And
Wow.
after reading that article, it was an aha moment of there's this big gap in the industry that no one's talking about. Such a big part of our everyday life can be impacting our health. And so from there, I just went down a rabbit hole of seeing as much research as I could find, having as many conversations as I could. And it was really just a great time to blend a love for health and then also a love for fashion.
I love it. Okay, so you mentioned bamboo, and I think this is like a great segue into understanding, because as far as I understand is like there's 100% natural fabrics, and then there's these 100% synthetic fabrics, and then there's all these like hybrids, like the seashell fabric that you're talking about, the bamboo. I think that's where it gets a little bit more complicated. But if you could just go through like what are some natural fibers, what are some synthetic fibers, and then what are like those hybrid in-betweens?
Yes, so natural, you'll think of anything plant-based like organic cotton, linen, hemp, or even animal-based wools. And then for synthetic, you can think of anything that's derivative of the petrochemical industry, so polyester, nylon, spandex, elastane. And then there are these semi-synthetic fabrics that are, you take the cellulose from various different types of plants and you break them down and you chemically make them into a fabric. So It's a chemical process which makes them that semi-synthetic fabric, but it is derived from plants. And that's when you'll see modal, tencel, lyocell, rayon, viscose, those are all semi-synthetic.
How does one brand choose which fabric to use? How do you choose like which fabric to wear?
Yeah, so it's really all about, what do you want the function of the piece of clothing to be? Is it something that you want more of that performance enhancing? So a brand might go to something more synthetic like polyester, or they need something with stretch, so spandex or elastane. Or if you want that breathability, flowiness, more of an organic cotton or a linen. So it really just depends on, what they want the end user to have. But at the end of the day, what is least toxic is to look for a couple different things, but when we're talking about fabrics specifically, definitely toward natural fibers. And then if you are looking for something that you want that stretch or to work out in, it's just best to see the ratio of natural fibers to synthetic. So if you see 90% organic cotton, but it is 10% elastane or spandex, that's still a better option than looking for something that's just 100% polyester to work out in.
I see this often. And sometimes people will message me, like, I'll start to talk, I'll post a video talking about a brand or whatever. And they're like, oh, well, they use, some spandex in some of their products. And I was talking to one brand who they're really trying to create like 100% natural clothing, but it's hard to do that without using like some percentage of the synthetics to get like a stretch around the elastic waist. So what do you think is like a good cutoff? Like, do you have guidelines of like what percentage you try to go for?
I try to do 92 to 8% if you're
Wow.
looking at activewear, so
Okay.
92% organic cotton, or if you like tencel lyocell or something else, and then that 8% of spandex or elastane. It's really, unless you have super sensitive skin to spandex or elastane, that small percentage isn't going to make a big difference, and it's the best option that's on the market right now. We are starting to see these bioplastics. So it's a plastic, but it's made out of plant-based materials, which is a step in the right direction. But the problem with that is they are treated the same way as plastics. The same chemicals are used to give it that plastic property. So to
Gotcha.
me, what's best is to just, stick with spandex or elastane for that 8% or even less if you can, and the rest look for natural fibers. And this is mostly for activewear.
Awesome.
Everything else I try to keep
Activewear.
it even lower.
Yeah. Okay.
I almost like want to back up just a little bit.
Do it.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
this might be a silly question. When you're making, let's just say a shirt, and you go through the process of, okay, there's like a seed in the ground, cotton's being made, then it's transported to a facility, and then there's manufacturing going on, and it gets sent out to a million different places. At what point are chemicals added? Like, where is the the
That's a good question.
disconnect?
Yeah, absolutely. Really at any point. So you can talk
Okay.
about in the farming of cotton, there's organic cotton, which
Mm-hmm.
is made without synthetic pesticides and herbicides, or there's conventional cotton, which is made using these synthetic pesticides and herbicides. So there's the farming process of chemicals, and then when they are in the factory, being manufactured. It can be, in the form of a dye, a treatment. If you see something that's sweat wicking or stain resistant, those are all chemicals used to give the fabric that property. Most fabrics aren't inherently, stain resistant or wrinkle resistant. It needs something to
Mm,
give it that property. And then
got
even
it.
in shipping, depending on where it's coming from, it might be sprayed with something to keep insects off of it, or, depending on how it's being distributed. So even in that packaging and shipping process, there could be chemicals coming into contact with it. Or even if you're in a store and the store likes to spray a certain scent or something around just to
Mm.
keep things feeling clean, that's another area where chemicals can come in as well.
There's nothing worse, and I am totally guilty of doing this, of just like, ordering some cheap clothes on Amazon,
Oh yeah.
opening up the package, and the smell alone, it hits you when you're like,
Or
I feel gross. The fact that I even ordered this. Monica and I just went to Mexico a couple weeks ago, and I was like, I just want a couple new little things for Mexico. And I was like shopping super last minute, obviously. I had to get them shipped in literally 2 days before we left. And they came in, and I was like, I can't wear this. Like, it needs to be immediately returned. It just, the smell, you can smell
Yeah.
the chemicals on it.
There's some clothes that have more chemicals, just like if you see water resistant, that's probably has a chemical associated with it. So like
right. So if you see
sportswear,
anything,
gotcha.
yeah, that's water repellent. Usually that's PFAS, which are forever chemicals, and those have been linked to endocrine disruption in the body. And we've seen studies that show that when you're sweating in something, the sweat can actually pull the chemicals off of the fabric and get into your system in that way. So you definitely don't want something that's treated with PFAS getting into your system. And then if you see wrinkle resistant, that's usually formaldehyde. Stain resistant can be PFAS as well. If you see even like a big logo on something like a big printed ink, that could be phthalates. So there's all these different
Wow.
chemicals that have been linked to endocrine disruption that are giving clothes what we want. We want them to have these bright colors and all this personality to it. But
Right.
now we're starting to see that they all have repercussions.
Yeah.
It's
Are
so
there
crazy.
no, that's literally
And we're like
wild.
literally wearing them all day long too.
Yeah.
Like, we live in these clothes. I think about it. I'm like,
Yep.
unless you're in the shower,
Yep.
like, or like walking around without any clothes on, like you have fabric touching you at all points. Like whether you're just wearing clothes, whether you're in your towel, whether you're in your sheets, like these fabrics are just constantly touching you.
Totally. And I'm just thinking of like even when we were kids, like that's what we were wearing. We were wearing like plastic t-shirts and the
Yep.
logos were everything.
Yep.
Is there a certain dye that is worse than others?
Yeah, so most synthetics, especially polyester, needs a certain type of a dye to actually adhere to it. And the main dye used on polyester and other synthetics are dispersed dyes. Dispersed dyes have been linked to skin sensitivity, but they've also have a class that are specifically azodispersed dyes, which can cleave amines, which are linked to cancer. So if
Whoa.
you have azodispersed dyes those can might be carcinogenic. In general, most dyes used on the market are plastic based. They're just another derivative of the petrochemical industry.
Mm.
And so it's really good to look for, there's a couple different certifications you can look for, and then just there's some brands that are using plant-based dyes, botanical dyes, indigo, rubia, sumac, things like that that are all
Cool.
made from the earth. And so those are definitely healthier to choose.
Is there like a risk of those dyes? I mean, okay, I have a couple questions, but like, I guess my first question is like, if you're going to purchase clothes that are that have those more natural dyes in them, is it a risk that that piece of clothing is going to fade? Like,
Mm.
what does a brand do to maintain the pigment in clothes that's using like less plastic based dyes?
So it depends on the mordant that they use, which is basically just something that is an intermediate step of you put the mordant on the fabric first and then you put the dye on that and that just helps it to stay.
Okay.
But there are some brands that will know, colors may fade over time.
Mm-hmm.
So it's really just something like if you're okay with that. And then it also is a matter of the type of plant being used, how heavily dyed it is, all of those sort of things as well.
Okay. Another thing that I've heard before, and I'd love for you to correct me if this is untrue. I've heard that like synthetic based clothing requires synthetic dyes and natural clothing or natural fibers can be used with natural dyes. Like, is that correct? Is that always true?
Yeah, so that goes back to like polyester would need that dispersed dye, which
Okay.
is a plastic-based dye in order to stay on it. There's also another way of putting dyes on polyester called dope dyeing. It is a little bit more resource intensive, so it's not used as often in manufacturing unless a brand is okay with that extra cost. But I know brands like Patagonia are working toward that, and it actually is a way that the dye will stay on the clothes more so than running off. So even though it is a
Mm,
plastic-based dye, it has less of a runoff factor and so less
okay.
of getting into the environment and all that.
Got it. Less of a chance of your body absorbing it and less of a chance of it getting into the environment. I also hear that, like, kind of going back to what you were saying about waterproof clothing, and like, I hear that waterproof clothing has the most amount of like PFAs in it, and like that's contributing to pollution, like microplastic pollution and bioaccumulation in the earth. Is that true? Like, what's going on there?
Yeah, absolutely. So PFAS do not ever degrade in the environment and they cannot be broken down by your metabolism. So it's just a matter of accumulating in your body or in, waterways, in the air, and then it can get, in rainwater and I'll go through the full water cycle. It can also get into sources of water and then sources of food as well if it's getting into aquatic life. So for PFAS, the idea again was, you want something water wicking, depending
Mm-hmm.
if you want a raincoat or it's a positive property, but the chemical that's being used has all of these repercussions. And PFAS have been again linked to endocrine disruption, and so you don't want them building up in your body or in the environment, and then also harming plant or aquatic life because it's just accumulating and never breaking down.
Right.
Yeah. So going back to the dyes, are there countries that have more like rules and regulations surrounding like the fabrics we use, the dyes that we put in, and like what are like the best countries to get clothes from?
So the problem with this is that a lot of brands will outsource for dyeing because it's cheaper
Mm.
abroad. There's virtually no dye houses in the US anymore because of how toxic they were. And if you go
Ugh.
to the sites that there were dye houses, it's still toxic and they have,
Oh my
signs
gosh.
saying that you shouldn't go into this area
Oh my God.
because dyes would build up in waterways and then, kids would jump in it and it would give them issues in their skin or in their health and all that. So most dyeing actually isn't even done in the United States
Wow.
unless it's farm-based dyeing with plants and botanicals, which there are quite a few brands that do. So in general, it's more so done in India and China, and it just
Mm.
depends on the manufacturer and the regulations that they have. A lot of them, after learning about the impacts on the environment and on our health, they do a lot of cleanup and chemical management to make sure that it doesn't run off into nearby rivers and waterways
Okay.
and that the dyes are just reused. But it's really more manufacturer specific. So it's more so looking at brands that are certified. And two certifications that you would look for specific to dyes are the Ecotex Standard 100 certification. So Ecotex just looks at the final product and tests it for over 3,000 chemicals, including the PFAS that we talked about, to make sure that it's free from all of those. And it does include dyes to make sure that certain dyes that are linked to cancer and other issues are not used. And then there's the Blue Sign certification. So Blue Sign is all about clean chemistry and making sure that the chemistry used doesn't impact garment workers, the environment, or consumers. So that's another really great one to look for as well. And then along with just, again, the plant-based dyes.
Wow, this is like a lot.
It's crazy.
It's a lot of
I want to
information.
like look at me. I want to like look at my
Yeah.
tab.
No, it's gonna have you start looking
That's
at
that's the other thing. Like, how do I, as a consumer, know like what's in my clothing? Where do I go? Where do I look?
So for clothing tags, they only need to show fabric composition, country of origin, and washing instructions. And also none of that's fact checked. So you
Oh,
can,
perfect.
potentially say it's 90% organic cotton, but maybe it's actually 80%, so you have to look for more of reputable brands. They don't have to say what dyes are used. They don't have to say what measures are used. So that's why there are certain brands that I really like Made the Label, for example. They have a restricted substances list on their website that you can go through and see all of the dispersed dyes that they are not allowing and formaldehyde and all different chemicals. So it's really more so looking for transparency from
Brands.
brands so that you can see, is there a certification that they have around dyes or just around chemical usage or chemical management in general. And then just do they give you that information on what ingredients are used? I think that as consumers have more information around, wanting to know where their money is going and how it's impacting their health, brands are going to be a little bit more pushed toward that transparency, but they're not going to do it unless they absolutely have to. So we're
Yeah.
definitely seeing more of small brands pioneering the space in that way.
Love it. So, okay, so you talked to us a little bit about the OECO-TEX certification, and then you said Blue Sign is the other.
Yes.
Okay, so talk to us a little bit about other like certifications that we should look for and like what each of those mean.
So there's the GOTS Global Organic Textile Standard, which is
Okay.
all about making sure from start to finish, everything used is organic processes from farm all the way to dyes. So that is a really good one just in general for organic processes. It's not exactly one-to-one with toxicity, but I would say it's a more low tox thing to look for when it comes to dyes as well. And then, so, specifically when you're looking for toxicity, I would look at that Ecotex and Blue Sign. And then for organic, there's the GOTS. There's also smaller organic measurements that you can look for, like the OCS. And then there's Better Cotton Initiative, which is just all about, making sure that farming used for cotton is better on the environment and there's less water usage. And then there's some that are more specific to garment workers' rights, like fair trade and fair wear, which are just making sure that they have, equal pay and then they have the resources that they need and they're not being harmed in the way that they are handling chemicals and just living their life day to day in their work. And then there's FSC, which is all about forestry. So they want to lower deforestation and make sure that resources are used properly. And then if you're looking for more like animal rights, there is a Leaping Bunny and then PETA, of course. The main difference between the two of those is that Leaping Bunny does require brands to do audits every year.
Mm.
So that's definitely a really good one to look for.
Who doesn't love a candle? I know some of my simple pleasures in life include cleaning my house, getting cozy on the couch, putting on my favorite show, and lighting a beautiful candle. But what I don't love about traditional candles are the PFAs, formaldehyde releasers, synthetic fragrances, heavy metals, and volatile organic compounds that are often found in them. It definitely just ruins the experience for me if I know that I'm potentially breathing in carcinogenic or hormone disrupting chemicals. And this is why I almost exclusively shop Fate Naturals candles. She has somehow made non-toxic candles smell as potent as the ones that you would buy at Home Goods. I have yet to recommend this candle brand to someone who does not absolutely love them. What's also so fun about Fate Naturals is that she does these seasonal drops. So each season she comes out with a collection of 6 scented candles. The spring collection that just dropped has the scents Succulent Garden, Yuzu Blossom, Blueberry Muffin, Grapefruit Basil, Beach Bonfire, and Coastal Cottage. She also does a Candle of the Month Club where you'll be the first to try exclusive and new scents. The past few months have been Sweet Magnolia for April, which is a delicate floral scent, Lucky Shamrock for March, which is a combination of a crisp aloe and a zesty lime, and February was a Red Velvet Cupcake, which was very sweet and buttery. I have tried lots and lots of candles, and I just always come back to Fate Naturals. They are always my first recommendation when someone is looking for a non-toxic candle. You can get 10% off any Fate Naturals purchase, including monthly recurring subscriptions, with my code DetoxYourDome. That is 10% off any Fate Naturals purchase with the code DetoxYourDome, spelled DetoxYourdome. I promise you will love Fate Naturals. So going back to the dyes, and you said like the fair trade certification, how does that impact, we clearly we're not even doing it in the United States anymore. And actually, I saw you post about this book a couple weeks ago, and a book that I also read that will actually change the way that you look at the fashion industry is the book To Die For. And it mainly is talking about the dyes in clothing, and it goes kind of through the history of dyes in clothes and how they've caused health implications for people over time, where we're at now, etc. But we're kind of like, these dyes are so dangerous, we're going to export it now to China or India. How does fair trade help those workers if they're working in a dye house that's using those like synthetic toxic dyes?
So it's more of it's really more up to the manufacturer to make sure that they have that chemical management system.
Okay.
And dyes, so like you said, over the course of history, dyes have really been that big chemistry aspect of the fashion industry. And as there are advancements in chemistry, then there's advancements in dyes. And it was exciting that there's brighter colors when they were using like heavy metals and different things that were slowly seen to be toxic to workers who were handling them.
Yeah.
And I always like to say that garment workers are almost like the front line of, and along with farmers, front line of the fashion industry. They're handling all these chemicals raw. And if they don't have the proper tools and equipment or protective gear, it can definitely impact their health. And it's something that sounds, like, oh, maybe this happened 50 years ago, 100 years ago, but there's still news stories that come out that say, even in 2019, there was a news story that came out from a certain manufacturer abroad that there were 5 people who went to actually clean out the manufacturing and the tools used for dyes, and they all died based on all of the fumes that they were breathing in. And there were 20, they were young, and so it puts it into perspective of these things are still happening for us to have the clothes that we want.
And you do
So it's
not
really
hear about it ever. Like, I don't hear about any stories like this.
Right.
I know, I think a lot of it is hidden. So it's more of, manufacturers being on the up and up and having those chemical management systems, which are quite expensive to have the right tools and resources, and also the education to be able to teach everyone how to handle certain things. So, again, it comes down to who are you supporting,
right?
Which is, it's difficult because you don't want it to be on the consumer. It should be on governing bodies that are ignoring a lot of this. But hopefully in the future, as we have more legislation, there'll be a lot more rights for people across the board in all of these aspects of the fashion industry.
Right. And I think what's so interesting, and like how you're saying, I don't hear about this, and it just, the fashion industry just is a global industry. And I think it's like, it's just so massive, and it's so not, maybe we would hear about it more if these manufacturers were based in the United States, but they're not.
Yeah.
But like the thing is, these are still people. Maybe they're on the other side of the world, but like it still matters. And it is sad and scary that we don't hear about these things.
I think like people like to live in oblivion because we don't even want to know what's going on
Right.
because it's not ethically right. And so we're just like all turning a blind eye to it. Do you feel like, I guess if you look back at the last like 50 years, obviously like the way that clothing has been made, it has changed drastically. Do you feel like we're getting to a better place, or like where do you think we're going moving forward?
I think it's, almost like fixing the mistakes that happened 100 years ago and then starting to make new mistakes. Like we're starting to
Yeah.
see the increase in polyester. That really wasn't something until the mid to late 1900s. It's not, it wasn't used, in the 18th century.
Gotcha.
So sure, we're not using mercury in, patent development anymore, but now we're using all plastic-based things, which have different impacts.
Yeah.
So it's like, and it's of course, as much as we have research and we start to see things, no one hopefully started to use chemicals with a devious want or need in dyes, but it's just over time we start to see how it impacts consumers, but I would say how it impacts garment workers and farmers first, and then it's almost like a trickle down of, oh, it must be impacting consumers too.
Right.
Yeah. And did you say, I don't know if I heard this, but this is all linked to infertility and cancer. Are there like studies out about that? Like what have conversations looked like?
So I would say the main thing to know is that it's looking at the ingredients that are used in the industry and how they have been connected to these health impacts otherwise. There aren't specific studies looking at, oh, this person needs to wear this shirt for a month. Let's see what happens to them.
Sure.
It's more of, we know that PFAS are endocrine disrupting. We know from past research that BPA can absolutely impact fertility, can impact the genome of a baby when they're born, if a woman comes into contact with BPA when they're pregnant. So it's a matter of knowing that these have certain health impacts and then knowing that they're used in clothing, and the fact that we see that chemicals can run off of our clothing and our skin is absorptive and we can take them in. It's a thought process of, if there's BPA in this sports bra and I'm sweating in it and it's getting into my system, we know that it's an endocrine disrupting chemical. Next to that, we have seen a couple of studies on polyester specifically. They've been a little bit of smaller studies, so they would need to be looked at closer. But there was one study done where men wore polyester underwear for a certain period of time, and they measured sperm count, and they were basically had 0 levels of sperm after the amount of time of wearing it. Luckily, when they switched back to cotton or whatever it was, it went back up, and so it's reversible.
Okay, great.
So this definitely needs to be looked at closer, but they've also replicated this in dogs. So they looked at male dogs and saw the same thing, and female dogs, and they saw progesterone levels go to completely 0 and then go back up afterward. So it's again just that like extrapolation of, we're seeing these different fabrics, different chemicals, we know what they do. If you're wearing it every day, how is that impacting your health?
It's so crazy. And I also feel like it's similar to like so many of these, I guess you could say, industries within like non-toxic living that at least I like to look at, where it's just the same pattern of like innocent until proven guilty. Like we are just like, oh, this, and polyester and all these dyes and these clothing, like they have clothed many people for a long time. Like, we have to be grateful for that we were able to get like cheap clothing. I don't know if that's good for the whole long term of everything, but it's like we didn't even think about it. And now it's like decades later that we've been really relying on polyester and synthetic fabrics that now we're like, oh wait, maybe this wasn't so good to do. And I just feel like this is happening like in so many industries. Like we're just going forward with innovation, which sounds great, but then we look back and we're like, why are all these like health issues popping up for people? Like what is going on?
People are more sick and we're like looking at each other, we're like, what's going on? But we have to like be looking at what we're buying every single day. What would you say to the consumer who's overwhelmed, aka me? I haven't really thought about my clothing like this. Where should I start? Is it replace everything? What's the point A?
Yeah, so it's definitely not feasible for anyone to throw out their full closet and start over. So I always say to start small, start with things that are closest to your skin the most often. So underwear is a really good place to start. Workout wear, if you sweat in it, or if you're just someone who likes to wear workout wear often. And then things like pajamas, or even if you wanted to do like sheets or, towels, things that are fabrics that are around you for a long period of time. So it's good to start with just things that you wear most often and that are closest and when you're sweating. And then from there, look to see fabric wise, look for a higher fabric count that is natural, plant-based, organic cotton. And then from there, avoid anything that is treated. So it has those stain resistant, water resistant marketing. A lot of it is, again, marketing, and it just is filled with chemicals.
Yeah.
And then in regards to dyes, again, it's good to look for that Ecotex or Blue Sign certification or just plant-based dyes in general.
Yeah.
So it's definitely stepwise, and it's something you can do over time. Every bit counts. Even if you just start with, I'm just going to switch out my underwear, like that's a really positive change.
Yeah.
Totally.
Have you heard in the last like 5 years of like success stories of people switching out to 100% cotton? What has that like how has that impacted their health?
Yeah, so I think it's pretty specific to each person. Some people switch because they have sensitive skin or because they've come up with a chemical sensitivity just because of all of the chemicals that we are surrounded by all of the time. But I have a lot of people that I've talked to that have switched and completely taken out polyester, and now they all wear organic cotton or just plant-based items in general, and their skin is clear. That's another thing, is polyester is hydrophobic, so it wants to get rid of water and have water away from it as much as possible. And so that can actually lead to moisture and heat staying closer to your skin, resulting in more bacteria, and then increasing body odor and breakouts. So it can definitely help, clear out your skin, or just people who are trying to get pregnant and they're removing anything that is extra endocrine disrupting between this, kitchen, utensils, beauty products, all of that, and that's helped them to conceive as well. So it's really just dependent on the person and what their needs are. But it's something that, is only going to be positive to lower your toxin exposure.
So let's talk about workout wear. I feel like the main questions that I get asked are like undergarments. Like you said, it's a great place to start. And like, if you can't think of anything else, like just think about your underwear. And then I also get asked about activewear. And it's so unfortunate because it's like, if there's one place in your life that you would want the polyester and the synthetic clothing, it's probably like when you're going to the gym and you're going on a run. So what are like alternative fabrics that are safe to use in activewear? And also, there's these studies coming out showing us how we're absorbing these microplastics through our skin when we sweat. So I'd love for you to talk a little bit about that and tell us, like, explain that to us. And then also, like, what are some safe fabrics to look for activewear, and like, what are some brands that we should shop with?
Okay, so I'll start with the microplastics part first. So microplastics, we all know are ubiquitous. We've found in studies that they are in the blood, urine, and the brain. They were even found in fluid when a couple was undergoing IVF, and so we know that it's really building up in our bodies. The exact health implications of microplastics themselves still really needs to be looked into. I know we've seen a couple studies that hint toward them increasing inflammation, but it needs to be looked at much closer to have a definitive answer, which is hard because there's so many different factors and ways that they can get into our system. But the biggest issue with microplastics right now is the fact that these chemicals that we've been talking about, PFAS, BPA, dyes, can attach to microplastics. And microplastics are released every time you're wearing something, you're washing it, it's released to the air, it can get into dust, you breathe it in, or get into waterways. So it's bringing with it that slew of chemicals that, are the ingredients of your clothing, and then resulting in all of these different environmental and health issues. So specifically, when you're sweating, again, that can increase that absorption, and you don't want the microplastics or the chemicals that are being attached to it. So when you're working out, you really want to lower plastic that you're wearing as much as possible. I definitely prefer to wear organic cotton at the highest percentage that I can. Tencel lyocell is also a really great option. So that is one of those semi-synthetic fabrics. It is based with eucalyptus, so the cellulose from eucalyptus, and then that's spun into a fabric. I like Tencel lyocell because they use organic solvents and it's in a closed loop process, which means that they reuse the ingredients, and so they're not being released into the environment. And also the fact that it's organic solvents, it's a lot less toxic to the environment and also to the body than, say, rayon or viscose. So Tencel lyocell is a good one to work out in, organic cotton. Some people really like linen. I think that's more up to you if you like the feel of that and working out in that. That's really a personal opinion.
Okay.
And then, that 8 to 10% spandex or elastane is fine to start with. For brands, Mate the Label is great. Theirs is majority organic cotton. Bold Will is another really good one. They use tensile lyocell. And then there is one brand called Definite Articles that does use synthetics, but they have it treated in a way where it breaks down faster in the environment. And they test all their pieces to make sure they are free from BPA and PFAS. So that is another option if you prefer that. It's definitely more of a low tox versus a non-tox option, but it's, again, more of that synthetic feel if you really prefer that. There are other brands like Active, which has a higher bio-based content, but they do use a little bit of recycled nylon. So it's one of those things where it's like, how non or low toxic do you want to go? How often are you wearing them? How often are you working out in them? And then along with that is, again, the underwear and sports bra that you're wearing. I would say for those, since they're closer to your body, go as high percentage of cotton as you can. I specifically keep saying cotton because it's so breathable and it'll let that heat and moisture release instead of keeping that close to your skin. And that just in general is healthier for your body. But I have talked to a lot of girls who prefer to go commando when they're working out with their leggings. And then I just say again, yeah, that's not
Honestly, I
comfortable
do
to me, but
that.
everyone's different.
I'm
Okay.
such like a,
Yeah.
yeah, not, maybe not every time, but like, I'm just like a, whatever.
I
Like,
mean, you throw it in the wash anyway.
I know. I'm like, I'm immediately throwing it in a wash. It's
Yeah,
fine.
it's
I
fine.
will say also back to Mate the Label. I got their sports bras. I have one and I wear it and wash it like 3 times a week because
Love.
it's my favorite sports bra.
Okay.
It's great. It's
Mate the
very much
Label.
like supportive, like compression almost, like in the way that you'd want a sports bra, but it's not, it's like obviously, not based with natural fibers. So highly recommend that sports bra. I forget the exact name of the style,
I
but
love it. Made the label. Okay, I'm thinking about that. Is there a link between how long a product lasts and how sustainable it is, like long term? Like, let's just say, like, I get the Made the Label sports bra. How is it lasting longer than another typical sports bra? And then my second question is the cleaning process different, or can I just throw it in the wash like any other piece of clothing?
Yeah, so cleaning process, I would say, is the same
Okay.
across. You can really just look at the washing instructions to make sure if there's anything in particular to that one garment. In general, washing something less is more sustainable because you're not releasing things as much, but that's very difficult for workout wear, and I don't follow that for workout wear. I'll follow it for maybe jeans, or a dress or something that you're not wearing as often. The problem with the longevity is polyester will last very long because it doesn't break down, but it will lose its shape a lot faster and just the quality is lower. Where a cotton might not last as long as polyester because it's plant-based, but the quality is higher. And if you're following, the specific washing instructions, then it should last longer in the shape that you want it. So it's kind of a tricky way of looking at it just because synthetics will, virtually last forever, but just not in a high quality way.
right, like no one's going into their grandmother's closet and being like, this polyester jacket from
No.
50 years ago is
right.
like looking amazing. Like, no, it's the denim. It's like her linen dress. It's her like silk
So
robe
true.
or whatever.
The cashmere.
Yeah, the cashmere. Okay, so we've talked about a bunch of different types of fabrics. I'd love to just like go down the line as like a cheat sheet, like, in a couple sentences, like, is this good or bad, or like why or why not? Okay, so let's start with
Pop quiz.
I just feel like I hear these things and then it doesn't stick. So if someone's listening to this, they can be like, okay, at minute 30, whatever. I'm like, these are the 3 minutes that I know, like, I can listen to when I'm shopping, looking for a product. So bamboo, you said there's chemicals in bamboo. Would you or would you not wear clothing that has bamboo?
So if it's bamboo rayon, I would avoid that because it uses a solvent called carbon disulfide, which is a toxin to the environment. Bamboo lyocell, however, again, is that tensile lyocell type thing that I talked about before, but it's just made out of bamboo. And so that uses organic solvents, so that one is non-toxic. So it really just depends on how it's made, and a brand should know if it's bamboo rayon or if it's bamboo lyocell.
Okay, love. Okay, so then that kind of answers my question, like rayon versus lyocell. Rayon you would not use, lyocell you would use.
Yes, and one thing to note is that rayon and viscose are the same thing. So if you see that, they're used interchangeably, but they're the exact same thing.
Okay, and then what's so bad about rayon viscose? Is that it's treated with that?
So
ingredient.
yes, yeah,
Okay.
exactly. So it's just a more toxic process versus the lyocell, which uses a different process.
Okay. All right. Love. And then what about modal?
Yeah, modal. So it's a little bit more similar to the rayon or viscose.
Okay.
Sometimes it have more of a softer feel. So it does use another chemical that is toxic, but it's a little bit of a better option than rayon. So it's almost like if you were to rank it, you want like lyocell
Okay.
first, then modal, then rayon.
Okay. I'm glad to hear it's like a little bit better. My like absolute favorite pajamas in the world are like my modal pajamas. They're so soft, but maybe that's coming with a cost.
I know the fabric feels really good.
It does. Okay. And then cellulose.
So they're all made from cellulose.
Okay.
So cellulose is the beginning ingredient.
Got
It
it.
just depends on the fab or the plant that it's pulled from.
So you won't see cellulose on an ingredient label. You'll see like bamboo, rayon, viscose, modal.
Right. It might be used in marketing to make
Okay.
something sound more
Okay.
plant-based, but it's really just they're all a different type of plant, cellulose, made into a new fabric.
Okay, cool.
So you said that on labels, any brand can put whatever on a label. Where do we find all this information then?
So it should have on the label and then also on their website of like the description area of fabrics, it should say the percentage of each
Okay, so
fabric
go onto the
along with
website
that like washing
and
instruction.
go into the fabric section and look at all these.
Oh,
It's so hard to remember.
it is. It's crazy. There's so much to it. It's crazy, like you keep talking about BPA as well, because in my mind, BPA is just like in canned beans and in like water bottles. And it's really crazy to think that this is actually touching our skin. It could be touching our skin at all points of the day.
There was a study done by the Center for Environmental Health, I think in 2023, where they took a bunch of different workout wear and tested it, and they found BPA across the board in Nike, Pink, Athleta, like a lot of really big brands. So I think brands are trying to now, just like water bottles say BPA free, a lot of
Yeah.
brands are trying to say like that BPA free.
Right.
So it might be, something that we get to in the future.
Yeah.
But I think the other problem is it's very easy to take BPA out, but then use something that is a chemical that has basically the same structure, but just slightly different, like BPS or BPF, which have all the same health impacts. So,
Okay.
it's really a lot about seeing through the marketing
Yeah.
too of brands that say, oh, we're BPA free, but it's like if your fabric or your piece is exactly the same, what did you use instead? Because again, you don't have to disclose the ingredients and the chemicals used.
Right. So there was a study that came out in February that showed just how much plastic is accumulating in our brains. This study, published in the Nature Medicine journal, found that the weight of plastic in our brains may be equivalent to that of a plastic spoon, which is terrifying to think about. They also noticed that there were higher levels of microplastics in the brains of people who had been diagnosed with dementia compared to the brains of those without dementia. Microplastics and PFAs are truly everywhere, including our water systems. They are in our tap water, our fresh water, our oceans. I'm really trying to dedicate this year to finding ways to mitigate plastic in my life, and especially in my home. One actionable way that I found to do this is to filter out the PFAs and microplastics from my water. And I'm not just talking about my drinking water, but also my shower water. I specifically chose the Weddle Water Shower Duo because it's the only shower filter on the market that has been verified to filter out PFAs and microplastics, along with all the other general contaminants like chlorine and heavy metals. All the other shower filters I was looking at are really focused on chlorine and general contaminants, which is amazing, but I ended up choosing the Weddle Water filter because it had that added benefit of mitigating those microplastics and PFAs, which was also super important to me and just made this specific filter stand out to me. I also really liked that it was truly just a filter. Like, I didn't have to replace my entire shower head. I personally love my shower head, and I didn't want to have to change the entire thing. The install took no more than 10 minutes and it was super easy, and it just looks really nice in my shower. I honestly love the design and look of it. At this point, I'm sure you've heard the benefits of filtering your shower water. Not only can this have a positive impact on your overall health, but it's also beneficial on your skin and your hair. You can achieve all of those benefits with the added bonus of mitigating those plastics and PFAs with the Weddle Water Shower Duo. You can get 10% off your next purchase from Weddle Water by using the code DETOXYOURDOME at checkout. Weddle Water is spelled WEDDELL, and you can use the code DETOXYOURDOME, DETOXYOURDOME for 10% off your next order. So tell us about Day into Eve.
So, when I first started my research, I did a lot of writing for different brands, and then, platforms like EcoCult. And then after meeting brands and people who are starting, in that aspect of the industry, or they are designers or manufacturers, I realized I had all of these different connections that are all really on the same wavelength of wanting to provide healthier clothing options for consumers, again, farmers, garment workers, the environment, everyone across the board. So the idea was to start a platform that had everything all in one spot to make it easier for consumers who say, I want a pair of leggings. I don't know where to look, but let me look on this platform. And then I have a bunch of different options right here that have already been vetted for me so that you don't have to do all of the research, because again, it's very overwhelming, and you probably you want to have fun shopping. You want to find something that you're really excited about, or some people just want to get in and out and just know what to buy and not spend any time on it at all.
Totally.
Where I love doing the research and finding out and digging in a little bit deeper. So that's really the idea behind it, is to just have a one-stop shop for consumers to look at and know that, there is information there on ingredients used, certifications that they have, sustainability, but you just know at the end of the day, it's all vetted and better for your health.
It's amazing. I love this platform that you're building. It is so necessary. And one, you're making it so easy for consumers to just know where to shop, know that they've been pre-vetted, know who to trust. And then two, you and just your social media presence, you're starting to spread the PR around this. It's we need a better PR in this industry, because I think for, a lot of aspects of non-toxic living, low tox living, people, they know that they shouldn't be cooking on the Teflon pan, or okay, maybe
Right.
fragrance in my products isn't that great. I think people don't even know that this is an issue, and it's a whole thing that's starting to pop up. So I'm so grateful to get connected with you, and you're doing such an amazing and important work in this space. So another aspect to this, which you mentioned, that I think sometimes gets conflated with non-toxic living is sustainability. So talk to us about how sustainability and non-toxic clothing are similar and how they are different things.
Yeah, so it seems like most people think the general consensus is if it's sustainable, it must be non-toxic and better for my health. But sustainability is all about sustaining our earth literally where we are now and not getting into a worse spot, whether that is in water usage or carbon emissions or soil health. So it's all positive things, but it's really keeping us in this one spot. A lot of practices are sustainable and also non-toxic, but when you look at things like recycling, that's a sustainable practice, but it's not a non-toxic one, because if you're looking at taking, plastic water bottles and turning them into fashion, that can be highly toxic in the fact that these plastics are cross-contaminated with a lot of chemicals just in this recycling process, and then you're adding more in to make them, into a fabric, and then dyeing them and whatnot. And so as much as that could be a sustainable alternative, it's not a non-toxic one. And so toxic fashion is all about what are the ingredients used, how is it impacting my health, and anyone else who's involved, so the environment, farmers, garment makers, and all of that. So it's really a step beyond sustainability when we come into looking at fashion and just looking specifically at the health across the board.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. I know I'll often see made with recycled polyester, recycled nylon or something, which it does make you feel okay, this is good that this is being reused. But yeah, it's an important point that okay, maybe I still shouldn't be wearing that.
Yeah, and a lot of it is greenwashing, because there's a stat according to the Ellen MacArthur Foundation that less than 1% of clothing is actually recycled into new pieces.
Wow.
Because it's so difficult to recycle clothing. It's already dyed, it's a mixture of different fabrics, it has embellishments or zippers or, different things that make it really hard to break that down and making it into a new piece.
Right.
So, you see recycled polyester and you have this facade that all of the clothes you're donating are being turned into new clothing, which, they're really not. They're ending up in a landfill. And the same with recycled plastic. If you're taking a water bottle and you're making a new one from it, you can continue that cycle forever. It's complete circularity. But you take the water bottle and you make it into a shirt, that's the end of circularity. The end of the garment will just hang out in a landfill when you're done wearing it. Yeah. You can't really make that into something new. So it's a bit of a marketing ploy, which is too bad, because again, it sounds like a really great option, right, but it's, not always totally honest and feasible. And again, they don't talk about the toxicity element.
Yeah. Do you know how much plastic-based synthetic clothing is contributing to like plastic pollution in the earth?
Yeah, so about 14% is specific to fashion.
Wow.
14% of microplastic pollution, which, it's a pretty big percentage that,
Yeah.
the clothing that we're wearing every day is contributing to all the microplastics in our system, in the environment.
Right. And on that note, I just like, again, just thinking about all this, I feel like the clothing that you have, that's the cotton, that's the linen, that's the high quality denim, like you really are keeping those pieces for so much longer. Like it kind of, it's different than fast fashion, but like it's very much intertwined. I feel like if you're buying high quality, non-toxic clothing that's been made with such care, like you're going to have that for way longer than the random
Totally.
t-shirt on Amazon that I order for my Mexico vacation.
Is there,
Yeah, it almost makes you want to take care of
yeah.
it longer
Yeah.
and put it, like we'll have maybe a little bit more of a story behind it too. That's a conversation starter or something to hand down to like future generations as well.
Totally. I love it. Like we need to get back to that. I'm like I've been really into watching pieces, like period piece shows and movies and whatever, but like I always think about the clothing because I'm like they had 3 dresses and they wore those 3 dresses all year long and that was it. And like we just it's crazy the excess of clothing that we have and how we're kind of pressured to like always be in a new outfit or whatever. I think there's totally is like the shift happening where people are starting to value like high quality pieces that you wear over and over again. The whole capsule wardrobe thing. I'm like, I love this. Like invest in the
Love it.
pieces and
Agreed.
wear them a million times.
Is there a big difference between like the price of products and what would you recommend people do if it's just not like affordable for them?
I think that fast fashion has switched our brains a little bit into thinking that clothing can be made cheaply
Mm,
and that it should be $5 for a top, and that if you see $50, it feels like that's outrageous.
Yeah.
When really, if you are using quality ingredients and using, resources that are helpful to the environment, and then you're also providing garment workers and farmers with a livable wage, by the time that gets to your closet, it is going to be more expensive because of all of the time and effort and resources that went into it. So it's almost like conditioning us back to realizing that, clothing, just like everything else, takes a lot of resources to
Yeah.
make it.
yeah.
Saying that a lot of sustainable, non toxic pieces, because of that, will be at a higher price point than just a fast fashion piece. And that's when I tell people to look at cost per wear. If you're
Yeah.
going to be having this for years to come, for example, I bought a white t shirt from the brand Ask It maybe 5 years ago and it was 50. And at the time I felt like, oh wow, that's a lot. But here I am 5 years
Yep.
later, I've worn it probably,
All the time.
a couple hundred
Yep.
times. And so it's almost like nothing. So, if that's possible, which again, sometimes it still isn't, you still don't have whatever that price tag is, ready to go. So you can also start, again, if we start with the smaller items that are really impacting our health, like underwear and then socks and then workout wear, and kind of work your way up. That's another way of looking at it as well. But it's really that deconditioning to say it's okay to save up for something and it's okay to shop around a little bit, wait for sales, all of that sort of a thing. And then just have, minimize your wardrobe and,
Yeah.
don't buy as big in bulk all of the time.
Totally. I also feel like thrifting is a great way to like get some like high quality pieces. I feel like I've seen some,
Yeah.
I couldn't name them, but I've definitely seen some content creators out there who are like specifically thrifting natural fibers, and their content is also kind of helping you to identify what that means when you're looking at the materials list, like, okay, this is cotton, this is linen, this is wool.
Yeah, and thrifting, because it's been, these pieces have been washed a couple of times and they've also just been out in the world. A lot of the chemicals that are topical will be washed off or will also have off gas, which basically means that they're just, going out into the environment, which, pros and cons to that, but just health wise, by the time it gets to your closet, it's definitely less toxic than if you're just going out and buying a new polyester piece or whatever. So that's another, win
Yeah.
for secondhand
All right, so
shopping,
I'm
thrifting,
shopping.
or even like swapping with your
I'm
friends.
shopping
Love.
in
Shopping
my
with the friends. I love this.
grandmother's closet.
Yes.
Going right to her closet, getting all of her clothes.
Yep.
That's step number one.
I feel like Monica and I went to UVM, and there was like always people posting on their stories, just like, who wants to do a clothing swap? Like,
So many
like
clothing
we're like,
swaps.
yeah,
That's
let's
fun.
just swap it. Like, I just need something new. It's so fun. So you work with a lot of brands. You've created this platform for consumers, but you also work with brands. So tell us about the type of work that you do with brands.
Yeah, so it started with a lot of just educational content, content creation, or things for them to use in their marketing. And it's kind of shifted into a lot of consulting. So there's been quite a few brands that have seen my content and reached out and said, I want to be more non toxic, I want to be more sustainable, but I have no idea where to start. And then we'll just, get on the phone and talk through to see what are their goals and what can we do to get them there. So helping them with manufacturing, what do they look for, putting together a restricted substance list so that they're avoiding like formaldehyde and azo dyes and all of that thing. Or if they want help with just, how do I get this information to consumers in a way that's digestible but still scientifically accurate? So information on their websites, really at any phase of the brand development process. So definitely excited. There is one coming out with an activewear brand. So when that's live, I'll definitely send it over to you guys.
Yay.
Like really exciting
Cool.
things happening. And I love seeing that other people are recognizing this and that they're, excited about wanting to provide options to consumers because it's still very new and still very niche that there's a good amount of brands, but I think there's still room for, more to come in and help solve this problem.
No, it's so
Totally.
true. And I feel like I love your approach. It's not like a fear-based approach. It's purely education and you're just letting everyone know what's going on. So I love it.
I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, because life is overwhelming
Yeah.
already. And so it should just be more of giving you the information that you need to make the purchases that
Yeah.
are best for you and your family.
Right. And it really is such a new thing. Like I feel like this is like a something it's something we don't even know that we don't know. Like
Yep.
it's like,
Yep.
whoa, this is brand
Right.
new. So when you work with brands, like, do they ever have to like switch manufacturers? Like how does the manufacturing play into it? I know it's like I can't even imagine what it takes to like start a clothing brand because of all the different dye houses and the manufacturers and it's all over the globe. Like, what are the challenges for someone to take their brand to what it is to then make it less toxic?
Yeah, so it definitely has a lot to do with, from fabric sourcing to the manufacturers and the processes they use. Do they have chemical management programs? Do they already have a list of substances that they restrict or they test for? So it's a lot of, looking at the supply chain from start to finish to see, how can we adjust. It's somewhat easier if you're just starting from scratch because you know what to look for. So it's definitely hard if you've already started to work with someone that maybe they use ingredients that you don't want included in your clothing or, whatnot. So it really just, again, depends on, where you are in the manufacturing process. And there are a lot of brands that are bigger brands that will come out with, like one line that's cleaner. And it seems like a good idea, but it's not fixing the problem. So really looking at it from ground zero of where are we taking our fabrics, from how are they being treated, dyes, what even like threads are being used. Because again, like that's not going to come up on your clothing tag. It's not going to talk about threads. It's just going to talk about the main fabric that's being used. So
Wow.
it's a lot of trial and error and just seeing, how transparent some manufacturers are more transparent than others. And there are some that are like, oh yeah, I've been doing this forever. This is always how I've, made clothing. And then that's a really positive thing to say.
Yeah, it's just being able to like ask the right questions. So when you are helping with the consulting, you're helping with this process.
Yes, yeah.
Gotcha.
So what questions do you ask? I even have a restricted substance list that's almost like in a perfect world, we would not use any of these chemicals. And then comparing that against what the manufacturer already has in place or what the dye house has in place and seeing, what happy medium can we come to? Can you follow ours? Is yours more extensive? That sort of a thing. So it really just depends on, who you're working with and what your goals are for your brand.
Amazing. So, my last set of questions are about the frequencies in fabrics. This is something that I hear about. I'm super interested in it. It sounds a little woo woo, but I feel like we need to get into
Yeah,
it.
Totally.
frequency. I'm like, what does that even mean?
I know. It sounds very woo-woo, and it's something that was a study done by Heidi Yellen in the early 2000s where she took different fabrics and she measured their signature frequency and compared it against the signature frequency of the human body. So it's a study that definitely needs to be looked at more and replicated in order for it to be, a peer-reviewed article and everything. But it's something that just kind of shows that if there is such a difference in the different fabrics, it must impact us. Like everything on the earth has some sort of an, energy frequency field coming from it. So in this study, she found that linen and merino wool were the highest at 5,000 megahertz, and Organic cotton was at 100, conventional cotton was at 70, and then polyester and other synthetics were at 15. And compared to the human body, which, at a resting state would be at 100, and then a body that's dying would be closer to that 15 to 0. Wow. So the fact that polyester is a much lower amount than what a regular energy field is, the idea is that it could impact your energy or make you feel worse, where linen and merino wool can give you energy and make you feel better when you're wearing them. I'm gonna be looking at Again, it needs to be looked at more, but yeah, and it's, I've talked to people about it who
my mind is
agree and say, yeah.
Going berserk. How do you measure frequency in clothing?
So it was a certain just tool that she used, just a certain machine to figure out the frequency of each.
Enter my linen 2025 summer. I am linen in the summer, merino wool in the winter. That's gonna be my wardrobe. That's it. And then cotton on just a casual day.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's interesting that, I've seen other people even connect it to religious texts where they talk about, wearing linen and wearing certain fabrics are meant to, make you feel better. And so the fact that those were written thousands of years ago, and then we're seeing this in 2003, I think the study was, I might not hold it to that 5,000 is the amount, but the fact that linen is so much higher and polyester is so much lower, there has to be some sort of an impact on how you feel when you wear them. And personally, I feel like, when I wear linen, I definitely feel better than if I'm just head to toe in plastic.
Absolutely. I could not agree more. There's a reason why, maybe it's just me, but when I think of linen, I think of someone barefoot, walking through a garden, wearing these airy, beautiful white clothing. You could just feel it from the thought in your brain. And I just, there's gotta be something to that.
Some science there.
I'm so into it. I'm I'm starting to look and, buy some summer clothes, and I'm linen. I wanna stack my wardrobe. It's a little bit stiff. You gotta work it in there a little bit.
Yeah. Yeah, I actually, my favorite pair of linen pants I thrifted a million years ago, and it's lasted forever, and it was just one of those finds. So yeah, definitely
someone else broke them in for you.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I love it. Do you have any last questions?
What are you most excited about for the rest of this year with your platform?
So I think what I'm most excited about is I have quite a few new brands that will be posted on the site in the coming months. A lot of meetings we've had recently of brands that are just undergoing launch or they're undergoing shifts. And so, really building out the platform to be as many non-toxic options as possible for everyone, for men, women, kids. I just added a bunch of kids clothing options in there because, out of everyone, kids can be impacted by chemicals the most just because of their lower body mass, the fact they're going through, developmental stages. So that's a really big exciting part. And then I think just in general, getting into designing a little bit on that side. So that'll be exciting as well, just to see what we can cook up there.
So exciting. Thank you so much for all the work that you do, Lydia. It is so important, and I've learned so much on your page, and I love going to your website being like, I kind of want a new sweater, and I go and I check out Day into Eve, and I see what the brands that I should be looking through. So thank you so much for making it easy for the consumer and for sharing all this knowledge that you're learning with the world.
Yeah, thank you so much for the kind words. It was so nice to talk to you.
It was so great. Thank you.
Thank you.